My name is Chloe. I am 26 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have lived my life in the long, suffocating shadow of my parents' disapproval. Growing up, my family had a very specific definition of success. To my mother and father, a real career meant one of two things: wearing a stethoscope or carrying a briefcase into a corporate law firm. Naturally, my older brother Julian was the golden child. He became a corporate consultant at 24, and my parents practically threw a parade in his honor. Then there was me. I was the quiet girl who fell in love with computers, codes, and late-night problem-solving. When I chose to pursue software engineering and design independent tech solutions, my father openly laughed. He called it an expensive hobby, warning me that playing with video games and websites wouldn't pay a mortgage. Even after I graduated and began developing a platform designed to streamline emergency communication systems for rural hospitals, a project that took 2 years of sleepless nights and absolute dedication, their attitude never shifted. Every family dinner was a masterclass in passive-aggressive dismissal. My mother would talk for hours about Julian's latest promotion and then turn to me with a sigh, asking when I was going to grow up and get a stable, respectable position. I learned to keep my head down and find validation in the work itself. I didn't need their applause. I just needed my software to save lives. But deep down, a small part of me, that little girl who just wanted her dad to be proud, still hoped that one day they would see me. That day arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, surrounded by empty coffee mugs and lines of code, when an email notification popped up on my screen. It was from the National Tech Innovation Committee. My breath hitched as I scanned the official letterhead. My platform hadn't just been reviewed, it had won the prestigious National Innovator of the Year award. The email invited me to a grand gala where the country's top tech minds would gather to celebrate. I was ecstatic. My hands shook as I stared at the screen, tears of pure joy blurring the text. I finally had the proof. I wasn't just chasing a silly daydream. I had built something truly magnificent. I clutched my phone like a lifeline, my heart pounding against my ribs as I dialed my parents' number. I was practically vibrating with excitement, convinced that this news would finally bridge the immense chasm between us. When my mother finally picked up, her voice was characteristically distracted. I didn't let it deter me. I poured my heart out, explaining the national recognition, the significance of the Innovator of the Year title, and the upcoming Black Tie Gala. For a second, there was a heavy silence on the line, and I foolishly thought she was speechless with pride. Then came a sharp, dismissive scoff from the background. My father had been listening on the speakerphone. "Chloe, stop yelling into the phone about these stupid little trophies," he said, his voice dripping with pure exhaustion. "You've won a prize for typing on a keyboard. Big deal. We're in the middle of planning Julian's engagement party with partners from his firm. That is a real milestone. We don't have time to fly out for a glorified science fair." The words felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind straight out of my lungs. I tried to explain that the event was highly prestigious, that even major national networks were covering it, but my mother cut me off smoothly. "Darling, your father is right. It's sweet that your little tech friends like your project, but asking us to buy expensive flights and sit through hours of boring speeches for something so trivial is just selfish. It's an embarrassment to pull us away from family matters for a hobby." They hung up shortly after, leaving me staring at the dead screen in the quiet of my apartment. The crushing weight of their rejection threatened to pull me under, but as the tears cooled on my cheeks, something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to hide away. I filled out the RSVP, leaving their reserved seats empty, and decided I would face that grand stage entirely alone. The night of the gala arrived, and the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel was a spectacular display of luxury. Crystal chandeliers poured brilliant light over hundreds of guests dressed in elegant tuxedos and sweeping gowns. The air hummed with a high-stakes energy of top-tier investors, brilliant engineers, and corporate leaders. It was a world I had spent years dreaming about entering, yet as I navigated the crowded floor, a profound sense of isolation settled deep within my chest. I wore a midnight blue evening dress I had nervously picked out weeks ago, trying my best to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. When the ushers guided me toward the very front of the room, my stomach took a sharp downturn. Right there, directly in front of the main stage, was my assigned table. Because I was one of the evening's primary honorees, the committee had granted me prime seating, complete with 3 beautifully printed name cards resting elegantly on the white tablecloth. One bore my name, while the other 2 read, "Guest of Chloe Whitaker." They were painfully, undeniably empty. While the surrounding nominees laughed and toasted with their proud spouses, beaming parents, and supportive siblings, my table stood as a stark monument to my family's total abandonment. I could feel the subtle, pitying glances from the neighboring tables, their silent questions cutting deeper than any open mockery ever could. I took a slow sip of water, forcing my hands to remain perfectly steady as the lights finally dimmed and the opening music swelled through the massive speakers. The master of ceremonies took the podium, introducing the categories one by one, but my mind was a blur of static. I kept staring at those 2 empty chairs, wondering how a family could completely close their hearts to their own child's triumph. But there was no time left to wallow. The presenter cleared his throat, adjusting the microphone as the large screens behind him flashed with the official nomination graphics. And now for the National Innovator of the Year Award, recognizing groundbreaking contributions to public welfare technology. My name echoed clearly across the crowded, silent ballroom. I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked toward the stage alone. As I stepped up to the podium, the bright stage lights blinded me for a moment, masking the hundreds of faces in the audience. I adjusted the microphone, my heart hammering fiercely against my ribs. It was only when I looked past the glare that I noticed the massive television cameras sweeping across the stage, their red recording lights glowing intensely. This wasn't just a local web stream. The event was being broadcast live on national primetime television. A wave of realization washed over me. Millions of people across the country were watching this exact moment, including potentially the very parents who had dismissed my hard work as a worthless hobby. The presenter handed me the heavy, polished trophy, and the applause echoed through the cavernous room. Looking down at the front row, those 2 empty chairs stood out like a glaring wound, but instead of breaking my spirit, the sight fueled a sudden, burning resolve. I cleared my throat, looked directly into the main camera lens, and began to speak. I didn't give a standard, polite speech thanking a supportive family who had lifted me up. Instead, I spoke the absolute truth about what it took to stand on that stage. I talked about the endless nights of isolation, the crushing weight of self-doubt, and what it felt like to build something life-saving when the people closest to you told you that your dreams were nothing but a foolish waste of time. This award isn't just for the software, I said, my voice resonating with a steady, fierce clarity through the speakers. It is for anyone who has been told that their passion is stupid, anyone who has had to sit at an empty table because the people who should have loved them chose to ignore them. You do not need their permission to change the world. You only need your own determination. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, followed by a sudden, deafening roar of applause as the broadcast cut to a commercial break. Online, the clip was already spreading like wildfire. The moment I stepped off the stage, my phone began to vibrate violently in my evening clutch. I slipped away from the roaring ballroom into a quiet, dimly lit corridor to catch my breath, completely unprepared for the digital storm waiting for me. The screen was a chaotic blur of endless notifications, missed calls, and text messages pouring in every single second. My speech hadn't just resonated with the audience in the room, it had struck a massive chord across the entire nation. Clips of my raw, unfiltered words were rapidly accumulating millions of views online, trending at the very top of every major social media platform. But the real shockwave was hitting closer to home. Extended family members, aunts, uncles, and distant cousins whom I hadn't heard from in years were blowing up my phone with messages of absolute fury and disbelief. They had all been sitting at home, watching the national broadcast, when they saw the starkly empty front row seats and heard my story. The public exposure had completely shattered the carefully curated illusion of the perfect family that my parents loved to project to the world. My Aunt Sarah sent a furious text saying she was deeply ashamed of how my parents had treated me, while my cousin revealed that the family group chat was an absolute meltdown. Then came the messages from my parents. There were no congratulations, only panicked, toxic vitriol. My father had left 3 frantic voicemails, his voice shaking with rage as he accused me of publicly humiliating the family name on national television just to humiliate them. My mother sent a barrage of texts claiming I was an ungrateful child who had twisted the truth to ruin Julian's big weekend. But looking at their desperate, angry words, I didn't feel the familiar sting of their rejection anymore. The court of public opinion had seen the truth, and for the first time in my life, my parents were the ones left completely defenseless. 2 days later, the inevitable confrontation happened. I agreed to meet my parents and Julian at a quiet, upscale cafe near their house. When I walked in, the air was heavy with an uncomfortable tension. They weren't sitting there out of love or sudden pride. They were there out of pure desperation to manage the public relations disaster I had accidentally created. The family business partners had seen the broadcast, and Julian's firm was actively asking questions about the toxic dynamic. My father looked exhausted, his usual commanding posture completely deflated, while my mother kept adjusting her silk scarf nervously. "Chloe," my father began, his voice dropping to a low, forced whisper as he leaned over the table. "We need to put out a joint statement. We can tell the press that this was all a massive misunderstanding, that we fully supported your tech platform from the very beginning, but a family emergency kept us from the gala." Julian nodded rapidly in agreement. "Come on, Chloe, be a team player. Your little speech is affecting my standing at the firm. People are looking at us like we are monsters. You've had your fun, you got your viral moment, but now it's time to fix this for the family." I looked at the 3 of them, waiting for a single word of genuine apology, a tiny spark of actual remorse for the years of emotional neglect. But it wasn't there. Even now, facing total public accountability, they only cared about how my success affected their own social status. They wanted to claim a piece of the victory they had actively tried to destroy. "No," I said, my voice incredibly calm and perfectly steady. "I am not signing any statement, and I am not lying to protect your image. For 26 years, you told me that my passion was a stupid waste of time. You chose to leave those chairs empty. Those were your actions, and now you have to live with the consequences." I stood up from the table, leaving my untouched coffee behind. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free as I walked out the door, leaving their frantic voices behind for good. Cutting ties with my family was the hardest decision I ever had to make, but it was also the most liberating. Today, my emergency software is implemented in over 200 hospitals across the country, actively saving lives every single day. I no longer look for validation in the eyes of people who are incapable of giving it. I learned that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by the people who stand by you, who show up, and who celebrate your victories, no matter how small or stupid they might seem to outsiders. Now, I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever had to choose between your dreams and your family? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to mention the city you're watching from. Meanwhile, I'm leaving 2 other incredible stories on the final screen that will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until the very end.